In 1939, 5 African Americans were arrested at the Alexandria City Library as they tried to obtain their library cards. Attorney Samuel Tucker was behind this early sit-in, which resulted in the creation of a separate library for its black residents. We traveled to the site of the original sit-in, still a city library, and to the place where the Black Library was built, today an African American history museum, to tell the story of Samuel Tucker and the 5 people arrested that day for the simple act of trying to get a library card.
August 21st of 1939, 5 young African American men who were not allowed to use the library came in, and each one politely asked for a library card. They were denied. Each man picked up a book, sat down at a separate table, and the library staff just didn't know what to do with that. The African American community of Alexandria paid taxes, followed all the laws, but they were not allowed to take part in the things that every Alexandria citizen was allowed to take part in. This was part of a program that a young local attorney named Samuel Tucker had been working on for some time.
Samuel Wilbur Tucker was a native of Alexandria, really got a taste of wanting to be a lawyer for 2 reasons. One, there was a lawyer here in town, Thomas Watson, who rented space from Tucker's father, and he became fascinated with what lawyer Watson did. And then the other was that he took a trip on a streetcar with his brothers into D.C., and they were coming back from D.C., and they were asked to move from their seats once the streetcar got into Alexandria by a white patron who was there, and they refused. Actually, I believe it was Tucker's brother Otto who refused to move from his seat. And when they got off the streetcar, the woman followed them and flagged down a policeman and had the young men arrested. And luckily, the charges were thrown out because the boys were really scared that charges would not be thrown out, but the judge felt like they hadn't created any disturbance and they weren't trying to do anything that was illegal, but it gave Tucker a sense that being a lawyer gave you some kind of power to make things right.
Before 1939, he had an African-American sergeant named George Wilson, who was a World War I veteran. He had worked with Wilson to come into the library and apply for a card. Wilson had been denied on technical grounds. The Wilson case didn't go very far. The city was able to drag its feet and slow things down. So what Samuel Tucker did was to go to the neighborhood, find a large group of young men who were willing to volunteer to basically be arrested. It was a fairly large number initially, but it turns out on August 21st, 1939, there were just 5 young men who were available. They got dressed up in their best clothing, ties, everyone perfectly groomed. They came in, they asked for library cards and were denied. And Tucker had one of the younger brothers of one of these men waiting outside. As soon as he heard that the police were being called, Tucker came over with a photographer. It was Florence Murray who took the one shot that we have of the policemen and the young men coming out of the building. And it was Tucker had instructed them to be very polite, very quiet, and it was very sedate. He didn't want anyone being arrested for disturbing the peace.
It was interesting because Tucker had to fight Armstead Booth, who was the city attorney at the time. The case went to court, but the young men really didn't do anything wrong. They just wanted to read. And Tucker had another case that was going on, a case of retired Army Sergeant, Sergeant Wilson, and that really sort of started the sit-in idea. He wanted Wilson to be able to get a library card, and Wilson tried, and he was turned down, and even though he paid taxes in the city, and he was not allowed to get a library card. This court case, so there were 2 cases going on at the same time, the court case for Wilson and the court case for the 5 young men during the sit-in. Armstead Booth, I think, understood that the men weren't doing anything, and there was no reason to send these 5 young men to jail or to make them serve any time for what they did or give them really any sort of punishment. So it's been said that he asked for a continuance after continuance during the court case, and eventually the charges against the young men were dropped. For the Wilson case, the main issue was they were saying that the library, the Alexandria Free Library, was for Alexandria citizens. Wilson's case was that he was a citizen of Alexandria. During the court case, they said that Wilson did not make it clear when he went to the librarian that he was a citizen. So therefore, that she had a perfect right not to issue a library card to him. Eventually the case was solved in that they were going to issue, they went back, Tucker went back with Wilson, and Catherine Scoggin issued him a card, but not for the Alexandria Library, but for the Robert Robinson Library that was built for African American citizens in 1940, came out of the 1939 sit-in that occurred on August of 1939 at the Alexandria, or what was then known as the Alexandria Free Library. And they admitted that he was a citizen of Alexandria, but for Tucker that was never acceptable. That wasn't what he wanted, he wanted full access to the facility. I think there were two feelings about that. They were happy that there was a library and that especially the adults were happy that their children would have a place where they could study, that could supplement what they were learning in school, but they also knew it was sort of a Jim Crow library. It was not a library that was meant, it was meant to appease. It was not meant for them to have full access to the information that they needed. Samuel Wilbur Tucker, for one, never, I believe, set foot in the Robert Robinson Library, and in fact, I believe there is a letter in the document section of special collections at the Barrett Library where he writes saying that he does not consider this a solution, building this library. He wants full access to the Alexandria Free Library for all African American patrons who are citizens of Alexandria, who pay taxes and have a right to use that facility. They saw Tucker on the street in Alexandria. They said that they saw a man with his briefcase in a slightly rumpled suit, but he was a very determined walk, and he was always heading somewhere, and he always wanted to make things right for other people. He understood the injustice that was out there, and he understood that African Americans had so much harder time than the white community to get a free trial or to get access to a free trial. And he wasn't successful all the time, but he tried and he fought against the prevailing view, and I think that was one of the most important things about him.